Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Recruiters and a Microphone. I'm your co-host, Pete Cochran. I'm here with Israel Swanson. How you doing, Israel? Yeah. And we actually have a very special guest today. We're actually talking to our good friend, Angela Alberty. How you doing, Angela?
Hey, guys. So excited and happy to be here. After several iterations of our calendar, the calendaring gods came together so that we could record this session today.
They did. I think we were on a record.
Yeah, Dennis doesn't have anything on us,
yeah, it's totally has nothing to do with us. But yeah, we're at least 4 or 5 iterations to finally get this on the books. So we're super excited about having you and finally connecting. But yeah, Angela. So first off, a couple different things we kind of want to go through today. We really want to just talk about your backstory, get to know, Angela, and let our audience get to know you a little bit more. And then also, I'm really curious about talking at the tail end about some disruption that you feel that's happening in the HRF space, what's exciting you about what's going on, and just really the future of work, right? So anyways, just kick it off. Angela, where are you originally from?
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you, Pete. And thanks again to you and Israel for having me on the podcast. Really excited to be here. I hail from Houston, Texas. I'm a native Texan, as they say. I think I consider myself more Texan than American most days. That's kind of how we roll. If you haven't ever spoken to a Texan before, I grew up.
Yes, also the same thing.
Yes, they all.
I've got family in Houston, so
really?
the concrete jungle. It's like the most concrete I've ever seen in my life. Just roads and more roads, and just it's crazy.
If anyone wants to ever find out what a 40-lane highway looks like, come to Houston, and I've got you covered. Cool. Yeah, it definitely is a concrete jungle that takes, probably about an hour to go from one side to the other, just any way you look at it directionally on the map. I grew up on the west side, lower income background. My mom is from Central America. My father is American. So it's pretty cool to actually be and live and be a part of as a product of your community, as you could say. But my background has really entirely, I don't know how the hell I got into this space, but it's always been around the workforce.
That's how we all are. We have no idea. We don't go to college for HR.
Y'all haven't interviewed anyone that's like, hey, I wanted to be in recruiting since I was 4 years old. No,
not at all.
Yeah, well, kind of the same story on my side. I grew up going to the University of Houston. I graduated from there, and one of my first roles out of school was with actually one of the, I guess you could call it pioneers in the domestic employer record space. They got their start in the early 90s. And I got right out of school thinking I wanted to bust my ass and be a field reporter for some TV stations down here in Southeast Texas. And I realized as a kid with a lot of student loan debt and a lot of bills and never really any type of support, which I'm grateful for at the end of the day, but I had to start hustling. So I got into corporate America. And as you guys know, recruiting and staffing has a very broad opening and welcoming for those that don't have very much experience. I think if you can please a lot of people, you can communicate effectively, you are a great candidate for staffing and recruiting. So that was kind of my entry point. The interesting part of that, though, is I was on the back office side of it. So I was always, from the time that I graduated from the University of Houston, on the operational competencies that you need to run a fluidly and compliantly running workforce week over week. So I got my start there and then quickly went up to, different roles. I was administering payroll. I was working on the marketing side. I actually did a lot of contract underwriting. So looking at all the monster behemoths of 87-page, supplier engagement agreements is really kind of where I geek out on. So that's super strange, I know. But that's where I got
we don't really interview a lot of people that actually geek out on that. So
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because that's really where you start to find out what level of customization each, unique business development opportunity is going to acquire. So if you understand how intrinsic that piece of paper is and how really, how many layers of auditing you need to have through the life cycle of the worker, I think you're on the right track. And then a little company by the name of People 2.0 came in and acquired.
Small EOR. no major player in the e-work space.
Yeah, one of the largest global employer of record platforms, and that's really where I got my, I guess I got my wings. I'm very grateful for a lot of the different roles that I had within there, and a lot of the different mentors that showed me the ropes and really just broadened our perspective. We went through this globalization strategy that we were able to help develop, and a lot of the different audience profiles and segmentations that we were curating. One of the people at People 2.0 came into my office one day and he's like, I think I want to put you in business development. And I was like, talk to my husband like that way, like on the way home that afternoon. And I was like, está loco. How am I ever going to be selling this stuff? Like to my, and he was like, just give it a try. Went into business development, did very well, became the VP of North America for the recruiting and staffing division of a global employer, billion-dollar company by the time I was 30. So clearly I thought I knew it all, right? I thought I had life figured out, but I didn't. And I was humbled.
How was that selling to the staff? Well, you remember, because we actually, Israel and I have a good friend that actually is now just got promoted for a staffing company that actually uses People 2.0 as their back office.
Yeah.
So was that interesting selling to them? Like, how did you? Was it like a totally different sell as opposed to selling straight to the client?
Oh, it's a totally different sell.
Oh yeah.
I almost think of it very B2C than B2B. It's almost transactional in a way.
Right.
You can walk away from a week and have multiple, like if you classify your wind as a signed commercial, have multiple commercials signed off on. You're dealing with usually small to medium-sized business owners that have been a part of these larger staffing conglomerate, very bureaucratic, agencies, golden handcuffs for many, many years. They can sell they can sell ice to an Eskimo, but when it comes to like back office and compliance, it's just a different story. So I think what a benefit of also just going in and selling to an audience is that I had been into so many different parts of like the life cycle management of contract labor. So going in as a SME certainly helps speak to that audience.
What was the, so I dipped my head in selling applicant tracking software as I was sitting out a non-compete, and even applicant tracking software, when you're going up against like your bullhorns and your other, it's like one of the biggest roadblocks was the contract agreement or the contract that they currently had in place with their provider. Did you run into that? And then also as a roadblock, but to get over that roadblock, when your client said yes, what was that life cycle in regards to? They said yes, we closed the deal, turnkey. How long did it take to implement and then actually start using your offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. So non-competes, it's still to this very day is I wouldn't necessarily call it as an issue, but it's certainly a hurdle. And I think a lot of the times staffing agency owners, especially the independents, have to look at a business development strategy that is completely holistic and segmented from their prior books of businesses, which is just the way to go whenever you're launching your own company. What that usually means is that there is a certain ramp up period afterwards. And what we have found that can really be compelling is not only having the back office as this infrastructure to compliantly run contract labor, but almost having as a launch pad training, right? To say, look, this is how you can pitch the fact that you are outsourcing certain areas of your business. This is, certain templates to get you started. These are some certain contractual templates to get you going. Talk to us about like what your business development strategy is, what industries you want to service, and what has really helped us, or what we're really hoping to super launch into 2025 is this vendor of record strategy. So we are aligning ourselves with enterprise organizations that want to look at more diverse supplier models. And what are usually some of those inhibitors that are going to prevent diverse suppliers to truly have access to a major enterprise Fortune 500 company? Well, it's as easy as looking at the contract terms, right? What are the COI requirements? What are the funding requirements? What are the compliance requirements? Is this staffing agency audit ready? So when we can act as an intermediary, right, and be able to offer that level of indemnification to these parties that are involved, what we can also do is, outside of just providing this launchpad strategy, but actually providing business development opportunities to some of our smaller staffing suppliers to get access into larger programs that we are directly aligned with. And then we really create this full life cycle ecosystem of attracting a broad range of sourcing power through these larger enterprise audiences while acting as that protective layer in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I think I always look back and reflect on my time when I was a partner of a company and we were a very, very small staffing firm and then we grew, but we were always in-house. We kept everything in-house. We didn't outsource any of our payroll. We were the EOR or AOR ourselves. But I always used to tell them as my partners, like, we should outsource it. It was kind of a distraction to us.
Yeah.
Because we were always like running payroll every week and all this kind of stuff. Like we were supposed to be selling, but you would find ourselves always. And so it's really interesting. So did you find, and nowadays, and I do remember this too, and I was even at Modus, there were so many of these companies like factoring through loans, refactoring. It was a horrible thing. Yeah. Nowadays, it's so much easier for an independent recruiter to just have someone like mybasePay or something like that, or People2O to handle all the back office, which I found is really kind of an interesting thing that's going on in the industry right now. Because it used to be really, really difficult. I remember it being really difficult.
I think it still is. I think it's probably broadening on the terms of difficulty, because one of the learning curves that we have with the people that we speak with is as quickly as the world of work is accelerating, so are the regulatory bodies that are governing how to compliantly run through these contract and labor circles that you want to actually have as your revenue model. So it absolutely is evolving on so many different circles. And now you think about like the positioning of a staffing agency owner and what that looked like 5 to 7 years ago, right? There's a lot of different things that are coming to bat. There's direct sourcing strategies that your clients are looking to adopt. There's AI and automation techniques that, those same enterprise organizations are looking to apply to their talent and curation strategies. There's also globalization at its peak, right? I mean, there is going to be this expectancy to have talent pools. And what's amazing is that as a small staffing agency, you can set up nearshore and offshore now through these outsourced models. And I love this. Like I was reading through.
Amazing, because 5 years ago, we would not be able to do that at all. Like,
oh yeah,
no way.
It was truly like foreign, and I think it's hard pressed not to like mention Caesar in this aspect, because he'll tell you about like a failure. Caesar Jimenez is our CEO at mybasePay, and the greatest mentor I've ever had, hands down. And he'll tell you about how much time can be sucked away in the back office. And as any business owner, those initial 3 to 5 years, 90% of your time, which is something I have struggled with too, needs to be focused on business development, go-to-market strategies, and the actual execution of your book. So yeah, that's part of it.
Well, so speaking of Caesar, and obviously I love Caesar. Talk to me about like when you were leaving People2O, you were going to MyBase. How did that happen? Like, how did you get to know Caesar, and then just walk through that story?
Yeah. So Caesar is actually somebody that I met at a conference, as we tend to do in this industry.
Absolutely.
And
I think I met Caesar at a conference through our mutual friend Rick Roberts, which we all know.
Yes. Love Rick. One of my favorite Texans, and that's a bold statement, I would say.
He is a Texan, big time.
He's the West Texas.
He's got the best. He has the best accent, hands down.
Yes. I'm not going to bust out that twang on this show, but it was Friday night, and we were in a different setting. You never know. We get crazy.
We would all do it. It'd be great.
Yes, the Rick Roberts. Love you, Rick. No, I met Caesar about 7 or 8 years ago, at a show. I was with People 2.0. Obviously, he was a staffing agency owner, and we maintained contact for a long time. Admittingly, that was somebody that I had on my radar for a while.
So was this was a pro source? Was he using People 2.0 then?
No,
he wasn't. Okay.
No, but that was definitely as a business development person.
Right. Yeah, that's what you wanted.
I guess right at the end of 2020, I kind of went through this personal hiatus. I like I said, I was a younger kid. I was in my 30s, probably 31. Just had a baby. Wanted to go for another baby. Really finding the push and pull of managing 7 to 8 folks that didn't have a background in staffing. So you're like, this is an MSP and this is a market, right? Most of your days. And then really just, I guess, struggling. So I kind of went on this Central American journey to my roots for about 6 weeks. And I came back and I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw in the towel. People 2.0 was wonderful. And I'm very grateful for that experience. But I wanted to try to be a mom, a stay-at-home mom for a while. And let me tell you, I have failed a lot, but if there's something that I have failed at very well, it's being a stay-at-home parent, because God bless whoever can do that selfless role 24 hours a day. I found myself, and by the way, a pandemic was happening, right?
I was about to say, if you were saying 2020, the year itself stuff. So yeah.
Like 2020 is happening. You want to try to be a stay-at-home parent, and then like the world goes upside down, and it's like me and a pile of dirty laundry and Lifetime, 9 p.m. Just like, in my worst stage. So I didn't do very well. So I was trying to go back into the market. And then Caesar during that time reached out to me and he's like, hey, we have this opportunity to do an EOR. And I had done some consulting and I was trying to figure out what was going to be that next step. I was actually considering going back to People 2.0. And the two people that I respect and admire the most, my mom, my husband. And I asked my mom.
Those are good ones to respect.
Those are good ones, right?
Yeah.
My mom, I asked her what I should do. And my mom said, no, mija, you go back to People 2.0. They love you. You love them, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. And I told my husband.
Like going back home.
That security blanket for the baby is what she was looking for. And then my husband was like, let's do this. Come on. You can do it. Like, do the startup route. I think like he would have chest bumped me if he could, like right in that very moment. We went
polar opposite answers to that question.
Polar opposite answers, and I went with the risk, and I'm very glad I did it. Caesar, I think, saw something in myself that I didn't, and it's really awesome to have somebody that can support you and like remind you. And obviously him and what he's been able to build. It's just been a great partnership, and we were able to get some very sizable funding in our launch, which has kind of helped do this rocket pad of 3 years ago, launching the company and being where we are now.
That's crazy, the growth that you guys have seen in 3 years. I mean, I do. That's just, again, going into a fairly, it's not a saturated market, right? EOR anywhere. But I mean, there are a lot of competitors. There are a lot of companies doing that. And I do hands down to you and the entire MyBase team, and of course Caesar, to have that growth that you saw in 3 years. It's just phenomenal.
Thank you.
So, and that's kind of how I met you, obviously, and through our good friend Rick. So here you are now. You're running you're at MyBase as one of the co-founders, which is awesome. So Caesar was able to convince you to take that leap, which is amazing, and obviously your husband. Speaking of that, what does your mom say now? Just kind of curious. Does she say you made the right decision? She's like, no, the security blanket of People 2.0, you should call them back.
No, definitely not. But my mom, every single second, like if I could be a little ounce of what my mom could be, she always tells me that she's proud of me, but she's like a pillar that I look up to. That woman has hustled from the time we were like, as far as I can remember. She has 7 kids, 7 days a week, lower income Houston. Like we would we would go to her to different dealerships to clean up the dealership offices, clean up the office spaces. I would go to my mom's house and like help her nanny. So like that ethic of working as hard as I could possibly work, I think has been given to my mom. She always says, trabajar es la ley de la vida. It's just the way of life. It's life's law in essence. So if I could just be a little drop of a reflection of what she's been to us, then I think I've made it.
Yeah, 1,000% totally. Still works to this day, and she should. So she really should, but she still does. She's yeah.
It's awesome to have that as a guiding North Star.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. So, so here we are. This is where I kind of want to talk. I want to shift a little bit to the world in the future, and maybe some things that you think are going to be. What's exciting you about what you're seeing today?
Yeah, what's exciting? Well,
because it changes on a daily basis, is what Israel and I feel.
Yeah.
There's some new trend, there's some new tool, something happening in the market every day. It's wild to see how fast, especially AI, is changing and shifting. Just kind of curious.
That's exactly where I was going to go, and not to like beat a dead horse or anything, but what AI and machine learning can actually do to the life cycle and the actual experience for contract labor segments is really exciting. And I think that as cheesy as this can sound, we're at the dawn of a very new era of how we can actually integrate AI and machine learning to integral like HR functions from the time that these workers get onboarded to their satisfaction of their role afterwards. And I think what makes me very excited about that is that now there's two sides to every coin. The positive side of this is that, you can actually bring in very human-centric qualities to allow us to build rapport and to build the very human nature of what is staffing, recruiting, and HR, right? The other side of that coin is that, it can be, I guess, absorbing so many administrative tasks that maybe that human-centric quality is at a risk. But I'm super excited to see what AI and machine learning can do. I'm also, I know this is like very 2020 of me to say, but hybrid working models, I feel like we're at the crux of, okay, we have a lot of work from home. I'm recording this right now from my home office in Houston. But I do think that we're at like a hybrid centric capability, right? So we're looking at working in togetherness in person for strategic initiatives and being able to work from home from that operational competency that you have to handle every single day. So actually seeing that come to fruition. And really what that means to globalization and having a compliant partner that can enable you to actually have a truly remote working or hybrid team is probably really exciting. And not to get political, but, we have a completely new presidential election coming up ahead, and not an election, but an actual new presidential administration at the end of January.
Yep.
So I do think that there are going to be very strong indicators that there's going to be an increase in contract and contingent labor segments with some of the regulatory oversight that we were initially looking at as a potential issue or an area to overcome to maybe be alleviated. So there's a lot of signs that are pointing to potentially some industries getting a lot of money and projects being poured into, and with less of a red tape over the administration of the compliant practice for these labor segments. So I think that there's some positivity in what this new administration can do when it comes to a potential increase in the contract and contingent labor. Those are my three, I guess, most excited areas right now on this day in early December 2024.
I would agree with all three of those. We can talk one by one. So within AI, and Israel and I would both totally agree that has shifted a lot of things. And I really do think you said we're at the dawn of it. We're definitely at the tip of the iceberg. We're not even seeing, even when I had a chance to see Paradox 3 or 4 years ago with conversation with AI and how they took over the career pages, I thought that was completely revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
But now that's common. It's everywhere. So now it's just becoming that's just like a baseline. Are there tools that you've seen within the AI space that have excited you? Companies that have excited you? Oh, they're doing some really, really great stuff, or I can't wait to see what they do next.
Yeah. Oh man. Phew. Every single spectrum of what can think of has a new AI tool that's being associated with it. There are AI tools. Yeah, I think they're specified like AI tools for the actual underwriting of contracts and reviewing contract terms and understanding the scope of risk. So think about this from a life cycle perspective, right? Blue Jay is one of them, right? Then there's actual ones that can help administer the RFP and RFI process of bidding on projects. There is obviously Chat GPT and all of the ones that we use that's going to literally replace Google. Like at some point, like we are going to go to these, massive AI tools and lean on them just for the everyday thing, like anything you're curious about. I've seen some AI tools. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank on what the name of it is, but I actually utilized it when it came to creating pitch decks and presentation decks.
Yeah.
On utilizing AI as Gamma is another one, right? Yeah. And then you talk about how that actually can be embedded into the onboarding experience of the very workers that you're bringing on to meet these customizations that you have from so many different layers, whether it's like local and regulatory aspects, the very end client that you're servicing, the type of worker it is in the country that it's being designated to work in, how all of that can be converged into the actual experience of the worker through the onboarding process is happening. And then, of course, the after onboarding process, the offboarding process, were they satisfied with their role? If they weren't, how can we escalate that to the appropriate parties? So it really is endless when it comes to how many tools in every single part of the life cycle we can actually embed AI or some form of machine learning into the furthered, maturity of that process.
I was at a lunch on Friday, and I was sitting next to a really good friend of mine, a guy who's I'm going to name drop him here, Darren Bounds, who started a company called Freezy, and now he's getting ready to launch another product. And he said a very interesting thing about AI to me too. Is he said that within the last 6 months, 90%, it's a crazy statistic, 90% of all Y Combinator investments are within AI.
Oh yeah.
90%.
Yeah.
That's just insane. So that's where all the money's going. So if you think about all the companies that are going to be coming out of Y Combinator in the next, say, year, all these different things are all addressing AI in some kind of shape or form. So we're literally just we're at the tip of the iceberg. So that's awesome. Going into the second one, I totally agree. I think 2020 and the pandemic opened up so many ways where we can actually. I was very used to working remote. When we were doing Hash Rocket back in 2009, we had a lot of remote work. We were working with people all over Europe and all over the world. So I do agree that now here we are where they can really work from anywhere. So talk to me a little bit about that, like from a compliance standpoint and with MyBase, it just feels like a lot easier for you to be able to do that. Like in LATAM specifically, because I remember when I was working with you guys before, I worked a little bit with nearshore, but nearshore is really starting to take off now.
Yeah. It is. I'm actually on the other side of the spectrum. My happy butt would sit in traffic for 8 hours a day, going to an office for the majority of what has been my career. So this whole work from home thing. Yeah. Well, yeah, in Houston, right? And it was only like really a 20-minute drive, but with traffic. But the hybrid and work from home thing didn't really hit me until 2020, right? Like so many other people in the world. So I think that a lot of the time, when you're looking at what are effective hybrid and remote strategies, you're going to have to think through. It's obviously, and I don't want to be the compliance police, but there is, geographic pools where you're going to have different compliance policies on how to properly oversee workers within that overall regulatory government body, right? So looking at what compliance factors it takes to either contract somebody as an independent contractor in that locality or as an employee, W-2 equivalent in that locality, and applying some of that to the policies, right, that you want to create in a hybrid and remote working infrastructure. For us, it was critically important to understand, we have a lot of talent bodies throughout Latin America, and it's like it's a different world down there when it comes to, it's very socioeconomic. So a lot of protective layers over the employees, a lot of holidays, a lot of vacation time, there's severance, there's things that we don't have in capitalist USA, right?
Right.
So adopting to that and actually applying that into a policy meant that there was different policies that we'd have for different areas of the
Right.
world. But how do you actually bring that all together culturally, right? And I think that's the biggest part of this hybrid remote working world that we're living in is how do you still create this semblance of cultural affinity and attractiveness? And I think as it is with so many things in life, it comes down to proper communication and what are going to be the tools, the channels, and the methods, the creative methods that you want to do. Virtual town halls, employee resource groups, whether that's Slack, whether that's Teams, all of your different varying hubs within those communication platforms are critical, but also having the teams be acutely aware of the fact that, this team in Central America has these days off because they're considered national holidays for them. It's announced, right? And then these teams in the US have these days off and they're considered national holidays for them. And what's the announcement strategy so that you can kind of create this symbiotic relationship of leaning off of one another and also growing with one another and understanding the cultural differences.
What are some of the, I totally agree, because I think, as you said earlier, when the pandemic happened, I would argue a huge percentage, if not over half of the companies, did not have a background at all, didn't have a work.
Yeah.
Right, so they were thrown into this world immediately that, what was it? Israel, you and I talked about this last week. Was it March 19th? Was that the date?
No, it was March 9th.
March 9th. March 9th was when the world shut down. And so when that shut down, March 10th, everybody was like, how the heck do we handle this? Right?
Yeah.
So
it was like, I believe the 9th was on a weekend and the world shut down that weekend. So I know that I got an email saying, do not come back to the office.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what am I going to, how do I get my stuff? And then there was an email, and then there was a series of emails that you had to go in stages. If you had something that you had to go get to prepare your home office, then there was a spreadsheet that was this team can go in and grab your monitors and come home, or your machine or whatever. And it's this is insanity. And
that's what we're all parents too.
Right. So then all of a sudden you're trying to do this job and your children's schools shut down. And I had two boys during 2020, I guess that they would have both been in third grade. So now I have two third graders
sitting on a Zoom call that no one even knew.
Single dad, two third graders, and working from home. It was an absolute nightmare. And then I was having to schedule around when the boys were they were in class and they had to be on a Zoom call. And I then had to work my calls around to where they're not interacting with, and I had 3 different stations at my house, and it was
upside down.
Yeah, it really was. It was insane.
Yeah, even as a mom, what was that like? You just had a baby, so it's just time took some time to luckily still. I can't imagine.
I did. We were very fortunate because at that time, it was in March where that was happening. We got our funding in April and we were in stealth mode. And I actually found out I was pregnant with my son, who is now 3, who just turned 3 the other day, right when we got our funding, right? So it was this whirlwind of everything that was happening. And I think that's why it was so critically important for and what an opportunity I'm humbly so grateful for the fact that we can actually apply what prioritizations are for us. And part of that was really being intentional about bringing in working moms through this, because it was, me having a baby. I think we won the SIA audience favorite at the Shark Tank that following year, and I was like uber pregnant.
The one in Phoenix.
Yeah, that was the one in Phoenix. So yeah, and it's adopting those strategies to know that moms were in and out of childcare and work at the same time, and I think that's one thing that we have still stuck around with is that very intentional, halfway in, halfway out before you can fully commit, because there's a lot of really big commitments before finding the right school, before finding the right daycare. So we have really been super flexible when it comes to a lot of our teammates here. And I think that that's something without a doubt that we will continue.
Yeah, big shout out to all the moms right now that were working moms during the pandemic, because I've interviewed so many people that it was a very, very challenging time. A big shout out to all of them, and obviously to you as well. So, lastly, third, you're really excited about the new administration. We talked about that. So, do you see like more companies adopting contingent labor in their workforce, or do you see it kind of like leveling out? I mean, I've seen an increase over the past few years. I'm just kind of curious what you think might happen.
Yeah, I think that what we've seen for the most part in 2024 are some stronger months, I think, than others. But overall, the employment index has kind of gone this, we've kept unemployment at a steady pace. But if you look at some of the public companies out there, they've had, from some year over year numbers that have actually been declining. So I do believe that, and this is me just making a prediction here, but I do believe that the next presidential administration will actually do two things that can help supercharge the utilization of contract labor. And I mentioned them earlier, but the first one is that there's going to be, we've seen some of the trends that have happened within the markets lately of just some very good performance. And those can be very strong indicators of a lot of different monies being put into various projects across many different industries. And if there's a lot of strong economic support, that means that there's going to be a lot of specialized projects that house many different either administrative changes that this potential electoral body is going to do, or even just industry-centric projects. So if there's dollars being poured into projects in and of itself, that means that it's probably some clear direction towards contract labor that supports the very projects that this money is getting poured into. The second thing that I think is that everyone from a compliance standpoint kind of is maybe taking a sigh of relief when it comes to some of the regulatory bodies. And, if we look at some, if you were to look at, the presidential election, when they were both putting their agendas out there were some very distinctive features in terms of the compliance oversight for contract and gig workers on the Democratic versus the Republican side. So the fact that we are having an administration that potentially isn't as much compliance heavy, they're going to be a little bit more friendly when it comes to just even independent contractor classification. This is what I think, at least. That means that you could potentially see some indirect or some very direct results of more increased utilization of contract labor. So those are my two call outs, but those are going to be the two areas that I think mostly affect why this presidential election could potentially lean on some more contingent labor increases.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Mm-hmm. Well, before we wrap up, and I didn't want to have Israel ask some questions as well, because I feel like I've asked all the questions, so sorry, Israel.
You're fine.
I guess, so Angela, for people, I got a couple different questions. So to wrap it up, for people that are just graduating and entering the workforce, and maybe they're thinking about going into HR and tech or staffing, what would be the number one advice that you would give them?
Maybe the number one advice that I give isn't narrowed down by the industry in and of itself.
Even
I
better.
do think that Gen Zers, and what is the newest one, Gen Alpha, right? Like the ones that are in middle school and high school right now. That's the name, because we've gone all across the alphabet. So now it's like we're back up at the A's. So Gen Alpha, Gen Zers. I think that there's a lot that we can learn from them. This is a generation that has spent their entirety of their life saturated in technology and technology for communication. So there's a lot that we can learn in from a generation like that. To the other side of the coin, though, I do feel that because there are going to be so many different AI utilization tools, and what are going to be the industries, or how can you find your niche within the specific particular technological advancement of whatever it is, right? Whatever, if that's HR, if that's recruitment, if that is something around the compliance sector, there is something that can not be overstated enough about being an effective communicator. And I was actually reading an article recently about the saturated tech space that we are in. The younger players, the ones that are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else, are the ones that are actually going to be the most effective communicators of these very complex scenarios that we find ourselves in related to the technical advancement of the niche area that you're supporting. So I would say focus on effective communication over complex subject matter, and poof, you are light years ahead of some of the peers that are within your space that has just been saturated over, text and short form communications. My opinion, at least.
Yeah, no, 1,000% agree. Israel, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm sorry, I do really feel bad. I
know that y'all have had a longer relationship than me. This is the first time I've met you, so pleasure talking with you.
Yeah,
I guess the question that I would have, because mybasePay is fairly young in regards to how long it's been around. So because you kind of launched after COVID, right? So what was the biggest differentiator in mybasePay? And it was a startup and you were part of it and all that. So that's going to add a lot of extra pepper on the steak versus coming from a global monster. But in regards to just the nitty-gritty details in the HR process, from that huge monster that you were at to then moving to a very much something that you were part of building, what were the main things that you learned from the huge giant that were like, I'm going to use some of that, but it is going to be so much different because these are the things that I know that we do need to add, and these are the things that I absolutely don't want to touch, because also you were experiencing the technological advancements of just life, right?
Yeah.
So what are the things that you're like, okay, we can scrap all of this because we learned from COVID in what we need and what we don't need. And does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. And by the way, you have an amazing podcast voice, Israel. Oof.
Oh, thank you.
Narrate
he does.
3 times. All right. So what were some of those things? I think far and away, and I lean back on our CEO, Caesar, for this, who just brings a plethora of industry experience, especially within the staffing and contract labor space. Number one, we advocate for the worker. And I realize how cheesy that can sound, especially from a new up-and-coming startup. But the advocacy is when the worker wins, everyone else wins, either indirectly or directly. So we really ramped up the benefits. Like, our benefits can go toe-to-toe with a corporate organization. We have standardized paid time off. We have major medical options, standardized paid time off for everyone, right? Including those that are sitting in Texas versus where it's mandated in California. That is critically important for us, because those type of benefits can imply indirect savings, almost incalculable savings. How do you really put a measure in through showing that this is actually something that can lead to better retention, better productivity, and better loyalty is really what we're all about. So we really prioritize advocating for the worker, and also we're kind of old fashioned. We really believe in doing this and picking up the phone and calling folks, so that we can ensure that we are actually bringing folks across to the platform and answering as many questions. So what are going to be those automated processes and that technology infrastructure that allows our team to not focus on administratively monotonous tasks, but to be actually able to pick up the phone and build and develop rapport across the various audiences that we service, which are workers, agencies, enterprises, in clients, all throughout that is what we're truly all about. So I think that's what we've prioritized from day one, and we will continue to, make a priority for us moving forward.
Okay. So I guess that also ties in back to AI and machine learning, and that having a major effect on just multiple industries, but in particular in this space, what I love that's been happening utilizing AI and machine learning is all the monotonous tasks that you would have had to do that kept you off the phone from learning who your client was. Now it's freeing up more time to then understand that, oh, this is where we need to spend our time. Instead of me looking over all these contracts and all the minutia of this, that, the others, and it's let computers do that for us.
Yep.
Why now we can engage in human behavior, and I think it goes outside of even working. Utilizing technology as a whole gives us more opportunity to engage in human practices in just talking and understanding. And I think a lot of people are fearful of machine learning and AI, and then don't fear it because it's just giving you more time to become a better person. And I don't know. So
I agree completely.
Well, thanks again, Angela, for coming on. I know we're at 47 minutes, so this will be a fairly long podcast, but this is great. I really, really enjoyed it. I love seeing you again, too, so it's always great. But, yeah, thank you so much for coming on board.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you for having me, sincerely. Pete, great to see you as always. Israel, nice to meet you. To listeners
Lovely to meet you.
and in the offices, thank you guys for tuning in.
Yep, see you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.